Have you ever wondered why we feel the need to explain ourselves to others? Why we try so hard to make people understand our pain, our intentions, or our worth? It's tiring, isn't it? Constantly reaching out for approval or validation, only to feel like it's never enough. The more we explain, the more we feel misunderstood. At some point, you begin to realize something important. Explaining yourself doesn't bring peace. It creates a prison. We try to define ourselves with words so others can understand us, but in doing that, we make ourselves smaller. We reduce who we are to a sentence, a story, or someone else's version of us. But you are not a sentence. You are not an apology. You're not someone's idea of you. You are a full experience, always changing, growing, and far too big to fit into someone else's expectations. When you constantly explain, you're handing over your power without even realizing it. You start living in other people's minds. You change your tone, your truth, just to be accepted. But what if their understanding of you doesn't matter at all? Healing starts the moment you stop needing others to get you. You don't have to prove you're good or right or worthy. You don't need to perform your healing for anyone. True healing is quiet. It's not something you explain, it's something you feel deep inside. The mind wants to explain because it's scared, afraid of being judged or forgotten. But your heart? It only wants the truth. And truth doesn't come from arguments. It comes from stillness, from silence, from knowing you're already enough. You can't explain your way into love. You can't explain your way out of trauma. These things don't happen through logic. They happen through spirit, through choice. You heal when you decide to, when you stop needing someone else's permission to be free. There's power in going inward, not to escape the world, but to come back home to yourself. You're not here to be understood. You're here to be. And being doesn't need to be justified. A flower never explains why it blooms. A river doesn't defend its path. The moon never says sorry for its phases. So why should you? Let people think what they want. Let them tell stories or make assumptions. That's their path. But yours? Yours is sacred. Yours is the quiet journey back to the place inside you that never needed to explain a thing. The part of you that is already whole. True healing comes not when someone finally hears your side of the story, but when you listen to yourself. When you sit with your soul in silence without trying to be seen or understood, you'll realize something powerful. Your healing was never in their hands. It's always been in yours. So stop explaining. Let go of the urge to prove. Come back to yourself. Sit still. Begin again. Not as someone who needs to be understood, but as someone who already is. And here's something to think about. What if your peace was never meant to come from being understood, but from accepting yourself fully, just as you are? When you constantly explain yourself, you start to feel smaller. You begin to speak from a place of needing to be seen instead of remembering that you already are. This is the difference between living from ego and living from your true self. Ego needs approval. Essence is calm. It doesn't argue. It doesn't beg to be understood. It simply is. And in that quiet confidence, it attracts what belongs and gently repels what doesn't. Trying to explain your truth to someone who isn't ready to hear it is like playing music for someone who can't hear its sound. It doesn't mean your music is wrong or your truth isn't valid. It just means they're not tuned in. And if they're not tuned in, your words will only sound like noise. You can't force someone to see what they're unwilling to see. You can't create clarity where there's no openness. That's why real healing begins with silence. When you stop trying to explain yourself, you make space to reconnect with your own center. You begin to ask better questions, not how do I make them understand, but why do I need them to understand? In that space, you realize how much of your identity has been tied to how others see you. You slowly let go of the belief that your worth depends on being understood. Living without explaining yourself doesn't mean being cold or distant. It means being grounded. It means trusting that your presence, your energy, speaks louder than any words could. It means believing that the people who are meant to understand you will do so naturally, without needing a long explanation. And those who don't, let them go, not in anger, but in peace. There's a different kind of freedom that comes when you stop rushing to defend yourself. When you let your truth just exist, whether people get it or not. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. It's the quiet confidence of knowing you're not for everyone, and that's okay. Your healing doesn't need to be approved by anyone. It doesn't need a stage or a spotlight. True healing doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need to be announced or performed. The world today pushes us to share everything. Our pain, our growth, our stories, like they need to be seen to be real. But healing doesn't work like that. Real transformation is quiet. It happens behind closed doors, in the stillness of the night, in the moments when no one is watching. You don't need to keep retelling your story to heal. You don't need to explain your sadness, your distance, or your silence. When you feel the urge to tell your story again just to be validated, pause. Ask yourself, who are you performing for? What are you hoping to get from explaining? Most of the time, it's not healing we're after. It's validation. And while validation feels nice, it doesn't last. It's not a cure. It's a comfort that fades. Because if your peace depends on someone else understanding your pain, then they hold the power to give or take your healing. But here's the truth. Most people will never truly understand what you've been through. They weren't there during your quietest struggles. They didn't feel the storm behind your calm smile. They didn't carry the weight you hid behind your strength, and they don't need to. Healing isn't about making others see. It's about you seeing yourself, clearly, fully, and without apology. It's about realizing that your journey is sacred, even if no one else ever claps for it. Real healing grows in silence. When the urge to explain fades away, something beautiful happens. You start hearing yourself again. You sit in stillness, not as someone broken, but as someone whole, learning how to breathe again. In that silence, you meet the version of yourself that was never damaged, just hidden. And when you meet that part, you realize all the explaining in the world won't make someone love you the right way. It won't undo what happened. So why keep performing? There's no award for the best explanation. There's only the quiet peace of coming home to yourself, walking away from performance and choosing presence. Healing doesn't shout, "Look at me." It whispers, "I'm here." It breathes. It unfolds. And it doesn't care who's watching. So here's a question for you. What would happen if you stopped trying to be understood and simply allowed yourself to be? The deepest healing often happens when no one is watching. When you stop performing long enough to actually feel, not to talk about it later, but to truly feel it, release it, and let it change you. That's when you stop living from the wound and start living from the wisdom it gave you. There is nothing left to prove, nothing to explain. You don't need to justify your silence, your boundaries, your peace, or your distance. You don't need to convince anyone that you're healing. You just need to heal, in your own way, in your own time, in your own language. Even if no one understands, especially if no one understands, because healing isn't about them. It's about you. You're not here to be easily understood or praised for how well you're growing. You're here to become whole again. When you stop performing for others, you reclaim your energy. You bring it home to yourself. You stop editing your truth to keep others comfortable. You stop hiding your tears to protect their feelings. You stop tiptoeing around your healing and start owning it fully, like a body you finally choose to live in without shame. Healing takes courage, not performance. The courage to sit with what hurts without turning it into a speech. The courage to stop needing to be seen and start seeing yourself. The courage to embody your truth without asking for permission. You don't owe anyone an explanation for who you're becoming, how fast you're changing, or how much of your past you're leaving behind. This journey doesn't need an audience. It needs your presence. It needs your honesty. It needs your stillness. So rest, let go, turn inward. Be still. And in that stillness, allow yourself to come back to life, not the life you had before, but the one waiting quietly beyond the performance. The one that is fully, deeply, unapologetically yours. Peace doesn't come because you finally explained yourself perfectly or made someone understand your pain. Real peace begins when the explanations end. It doesn't live in the approval of others. It lives in your alignment with yourself. We often believe that if we say the right thing, in the right way, at the right time, we can change how others see us. So we explain, we defend, we rehearse our truth. But no matter how carefully you phrase your story, people will still hear it through their own filter, through their experiences, wounds, and beliefs. And that's where the frustration begins. The need to be understood is deeply human, yes. But peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from understanding yourself, from realizing your worth doesn't rise and fall based on someone else's opinion, that your stillness is not dependent on their agreement, but on your own acceptance. True peace lives in the silence that follows when you stop pleading to be seen and start choosing to see yourself. Instead, because here's the thing, when you're always explaining, you're reacting. You're trying to fix how others perceive you. But what if you didn't? What if you let their misunderstanding exist without chasing it down? What if you chose peace over performance? That's not weakness, it's strength. the quiet kind. It's trusting yourself enough to stay grounded even when others don't get it. It's knowing that truth doesn't need to be sold, defended, or polished to still be true. Silence gives truth room to breathe. It calms the mind and invites the soul to speak. And in that silence, healing takes root, not because someone validated your journey, but because you finally did. When you stop trying to be heard, you finally hear yourself. When you stop trying to be seen, you finally see yourself. And that shift, it changes everything. You stop chasing validation. You stop living for applause. You stop needing someone else to tell you that your journey is real, because you know it is. Because you lived it, and that is enough. What would your healing look like if you stopped explaining it to others and just allowed yourself to live it? You stop asking the world to reflect your worth back to you, and start remembering that it was never missing in the first place. In the quiet, you realize just how much energy has been spent trying to manage how others see you. You've softened your truth to make it easier for others to handle. You've packaged your pain to make sure it didn't make anyone uncomfortable. But none of that brings peace. None of that leads to real healing. True peace takes courage. The courage to stop performing, to sit with yourself as you are and say, "This is enough." There's no stillness in constantly justifying who you are. That mindset becomes a loop, mental gymnastics that wear you down, all for someone else's approval. But when you let go of that need, something powerful happens. You become untouchable, not because nothing affects you, but because you're no longer tied to how others react. Their understanding is no longer your anchor. You are. It's easy to confuse peace with comfort. But real peace isn't always soft. Sometimes it feels like loneliness. Sometimes it's silence so loud it aches. But stay with it. Sit in that discomfort because underneath it is something steady and sacred. A space where you no longer feel the need to defend your right to exist. A space where your heart can finally beat without performance. A space where you begin to see yourself, not through their eyes, but through your own. You don't have to justify your journey. Not to the ones who hurt you. Not to the ones who left. Not even to the ones who love you. Your path is your own, sacred, mysterious, unfolding in ways no one else is meant to fully understand. And that's okay. You are not a puzzle to be solved. You are not a caption or a quote. You are a soul, a living presence, a full unfolding experience. And the more you root yourself in that, the less you feel the need to explain anything to anyone. Peace comes when you stop trying to prove you're okay and start being okay, quietly, in your own company. When you stop narrating your healing and start living it. When you stop describing your freedom and start walking in it. When you no longer beg to be understood, but simply rest in the knowing that your truth needs no defense. It only needs you, present, honest, still, and whole. There is a quiet revolution that begins when you finally accept that you were never meant to be understood by everyone. Your life wasn't designed to fit inside the small frames of other people's expectations. You may spend years trying to be relatable, trying to explain yourself so others can nod and say, "Ah, now I get it." But that nod can become a leash. That understanding becomes a limitation, because in trying to be understood, you may lose touch with the mystery of simply being. You are not here to be reduced to something neat and palatable. You are not a simple paragraph in someone else's story. You are breath. You are change. You are contradiction and stillness. You are laughter, rage, softness, and love, all wrapped in the invisible thread of life. To live only to be understood is to live in a cage of someone else's language. And no soul thrives in captivity. Being doesn't need explanation. It's not a request, it's a presence. When you live from your essence instead of your explanations, everything changes. You stop chasing understanding from others and start trusting the clarity that rises from within. You stop editing yourself to be more acceptable. You stop filtering your truth to make others stay. You let go of the exhausting performance of proving who you are. When you're young, you're taught to explain, to make sense to your parents, your teachers, your friends. You want to be accepted, safe, loved, so you adapt. You learn to perform your feelings. You rehearse your truth until it sounds right. And every time you feel unseen, you go back to the old script. If I just explain myself better, maybe they won't hurt me. But no amount of explanation can make someone respect your soul if they aren't ready to meet it. So the real journey begins when you stop trying to explain and start choosing to simply be. Not out of rebellion, not out of anger, but out of wisdom. Because there's wisdom in knowing that your energy is sacred, that not everyone is meant to hold your truth, that some things are too holy to be spoken, and that sometimes silence isn't absence, it's protection. You are not here to convince anyone of your worth. You are here to live it, to breathe it, to walk in it. You are here to be, not to be interpreted. And here's the irony. When you stop explaining, the right people feel you more deeply. When you stop trying to be understood, you attract those who understand without effort. Not because you've twisted yourself to fit their mold, but because your authenticity creates a frequency they already recognize. You meet them in the space beyond words, in the silence where presence speaks louder than explanation ever could. And for those who still don't understand, let them go, let them misunderstand. Let them tell their stories and draw their conclusions. Let them carry the weight of their assumptions while you walk free. What part of you are you still trying to explain, when maybe it just needs to be felt, honored, and left unspoken? The moment you explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you, you abandon your peace. You shrink your spirit just to fit into a space that was never built to hold you. And for what? For a nod? For a sense of being seen by eyes that were never truly looking into your soul. You are not here to make yourself smaller so others can stay comfortable. You are not here to be swallowed by someone else's limitations. You are here to expand, to unfold, to exist without apology. That kind of living begins when you let go of explaining. When you have the courage to say, "This is who I am," not with anger, but with peace. With a stillness that no longer needs permission to be. Because when you stop performing for others, you begin to meet the hidden parts of yourself, the ones you left in the shadows because they didn't fit the script. The parts you were told were too much, too messy, too complex to be loved. But those parts aren't flaws. They are fragments of your wholeness. They don't need to be understood to be worthy of love. Breathing is enough. Being is enough. You don't need to wear your wounds as proof. You don't need to translate your truth into someone else's language. You are already fluent in the language of existence. And in that language, there are no explanations, only presence. Only now. If the silence ever feels lonely, if the absence of understanding aches in your chest, remember, you are not here to be known by everyone. You are here to know yourself. You are here to live fully, even if your fullness cannot be explained in words. Especially then, because that's where your magic lives. Not in how clearly you explain yourself, but in how deeply you embody your truth. Letting go of the need to explain isn't arrogance. It's maturity. It means you understand. Your life is not a courtroom, and you are not on trial. You no longer owe anyone an argument for your evolution. You just walk your path, quietly, fully, freely. Because most people spend their lives trying to be understood, crafting perfect responses, explaining themselves into exhaustion. And still, they feel unseen. Still, they feel hollow. Because true connection doesn't come from words. It comes from presence, from energy, from alignment. Spiritual maturity is knowing you cannot control how others see you. Everyone filters your truth through their own lens, through their wounds, their fears, their conditioning. And when you know that, you stop wasting breath on explanations. You let people carry their perceptions while you carry your peace. There is something sacred in no longer needing to be seen a certain way. You stop living for the applause. You stop shape-shifting to protect others from your truth. You begin to take full ownership of your soul. You say no when your heart needs rest, even if it confuses people. You set boundaries without essays. You disappear without permission when your spirit needs quiet, because you know yourself now. You know your intentions, and that knowing is enough. You stop asking for understanding. You stop needing closure from others. You stop chasing explanations as a way to earn your freedom, because now freedom comes from within. You release the need to be decoded. You stop proving, stop pleading, stop packaging your soul for mass approval. You realize not everyone will grow with you. Not everyone will hear your silence correctly. And that's okay. Some people will misunderstand your boundaries. Some will rewrite your silence as distance, your softness as weakness. Let them misunderstand. Let them walk away. Let them hold the weight of their own assumptions, while you hold your peace. This is where your real power begins to rise. Not the kind that screams or demands. The kind that simply is. A grounded, quiet presence that shifts the room, not through explanation, but through alignment. You begin to attract people who feel you, not because you've convinced them, but because your presence speaks to something in them they already recognize. You cultivate relationships where presence matters more than proof, and in those spaces, you finally rest. No masks, no performances, just being. When you let go of the need to explain, you come home to yourself. You live more fully. You feel lighter, clearer, freer. You don't choose peace because it's easier. You choose it because it's true. Because resisting who you are has become heavier than being misunderstood. You start living from within, not for appearance, but for alignment. And that is where you find what you were looking for all along. Not in the perfect explanation, but in the grounded, quiet fullness of simply being. What part of you are you still trying to explain? And what would happen if you simply chose to live it instead? Thank you for being here. Until next time, stay rooted, stay radiant, and protect your peace.